Hello and welcome to our very first digital book club live with Jane Unsworth. I'm Helen Bagnall. I'm one of the founders of Salon London and also Festival and also Book Club Live, which we founded a couple of years ago. But this is the first one that we've done online. I just want to thank you so much for being part of it. I hope that you've got your crisps and a drink. I've got myself a seed lip and tonic. I hope you're ready for a really lovely half hour with Jane Unsworth to talk about her book, Adults. Before I introduce Emma, I just wanted to say a couple of hellos, if that's okay, and I can do some more after the break if you want to text in. I'd like to particularly thank Pauline and Anna, Anna Bissell, without who we wouldn't have a book club live tonight. And I'd also like to say hello to Joanna, who got this book club for herself and her friend for her birthday, and also to Celia's mum, Julie Waring, who bought tickets to Emma's book club tonight for Celia, Naomi, Bethan, Olivia, Meggie, Hannah, and Hannah, because they're all celebrating hopefully weddings this summer, engagements, and their 30th birthday, and she wanted them to all come together tonight for Emma's book club. I know, Emma, it's so lovely. So that just leaves it for me. I'm going to be talking to Emma for about half an hour, and then we're going to have a 10-minute break in which you can have perhaps a bit of a think about the book, some of the things you might want to ask, perhaps reflect on some of the things we've been talking about. I know that the books got to you slightly later than they would have done normally, and I'm really, really sorry about that, but I will try and keep the conversation to a level at which we're not going into too much detail about the books. I don't want to have any spoilers for those of you who haven't read the book, but please do text in about anything that you want me to ask Emma about. So it's now my chance to introduce Jane Unsworth. I'm a massive fan of Emma and her work. She won the prestigious Betty Tusk Award. Is that right? Betty Trask right. Award for her first novel, Hungry the Stars and Everything. She then wrote The Extraordinary Animals, and if you enjoyed Adults, really recommend you read Animals too. The book was then written by Emma and adapted into a feature film, which she did the adaptation for last year, and it's on Netflix and a lot of fun. And we are here tonight to talk about Adults, her brand new book. Described by the Times as a sharp, funny tale of trying to be yourself in the age of Instagram. So, hello, Emma.
Hello, Helen. Thank you so much for having me, and thanks everyone for watching. It's lovely to be here.
Oh, I want to ask you, how is your lockdown? You're in Brighton, right?
I am. So I do have a bit of a sea view, but I live in a flat, so I don't have a garden. So it's a mixed bag. And I've got a 3-year-old who's kind of tearing up the place a lot of the time. But, I think that, like everyone, I'm just taking it hour by hour, not even day by day, hour by hour, and just adjusting all the time, and actually finding that I'm appreciating things that I didn't necessarily appreciate so much before and take for granted. And I've just found ways of adapting. I think we're just so adaptable as humans, aren't we? But there's no getting around missing hugging your friends and just having, meeting up for a glass of wine, especially as the weather gets nicer and you just think, God, I could be in a beer garden now. So I'm missing all of those things, and yeah, but it's okay, and I know I'm lucky in a lot of ways that I can work from home, things like that, as long as my son's not around. How about yours? How's your lockdown going?
Well, we've turned the flat that we live in into a TV studio so that we can do book club live and do some of our big kind of talks from Salon London, and also we're doing our Also Festival digitally, and we worked together at the very first Also Festival when we talked about animals. But yeah, so we're just trying to keep going, a bit like a badger. We're just doing exactly the same thing, only without going outside. Thank you, though. Have you found it creative as a writer, though, or has there been any change to it? Oh, Emma.
No. So, firstly, I don't think I'm writing the great COVID novel. And secondly, it's just really hard with the routine gone, I think, especially having a kid. So yeah, that I've missed that routine. But actually, what I've been doing the last few days, which has been wonderful, and I think whether you've got a kid or not, this is something that I'd highly recommend if you can get up early enough. I've been getting up at like 5 a.m. I know that sounds horrendous, but I've been going to bed a bit earlier. Getting up at 5 and just sitting and having a cup of tea and just watching the dawn and just enjoying my brain at its freshest at that at that point and just feel like I'm giving myself my best brain first thing in the morning before the world stirs and the kind of anxiety starts to pour in, just to have that peaceful sort of couple of hours. And that's when I've actually done a lot of good writing and a lot of good thinking and just a lot of good breathing. So
yeah, no, that's absolutely fantastic. We did a big talk 2 weeks ago about circadian rhythms, about how you get your body clock in time, and whether this was a good time to get your body clock kind of like reset, because we don't sleep enough. And the professor said, the best time in the morning is if you can see the dawn, if you can be up for that early light, your body clock is just like, yes, I've got today. And particularly if you're suffering from anxiety or, not feeling that great about lockdown, it's the most fantastic thing to do. So you're right on it. And what a romantic response as well, Emma.
Wear my romantic shirt, giving romantic.
Okay, so I mean, what I felt about reading adults was it really was a book a lot about friendship. And there's a huge theme of friendship through your book. It's also there very much in animals, your book before. And I just wondered, did you feel that this theme of friendship was underserved in the books that you were reading?
Yeah, definitely. I think that partly it feels massively untapped as a theme of, to draw characters and stories, character dynamics and stories from. But also it's just something that I think about all the time, partly because I think I got good at friendship quite late in life. I think I was rubbish at friendship in my teens and probably for a lot of my 20s. And it's only really in my 30s that I started to get good and started to realize that the things I was learning from my friendships were actually making me better at all of my relationships across the board. As a daughter, as a sister, as a partner. And my friendships were the things that were teaching me the lessons. They were actually my constant. And they were what I was judging and gauging my health from, my mental health from, and just my well-being, my principles. A lot of the real, fundamental stuff of the human was coming from my friendships. But I think because I write comedy, it always has to be pushed through, some kind of funny filter. And so I think what I like to do is borrow the tropes of rom-coms, for example, and then put friendship into that context. So Animals it was like a will she, won't she marriage plot, basically, about whether someone would get married or not. But then her best friend, that relationship, who she'd lived with her best friend for 10 years, that was as important. And so I really wanted to explore how friendship could be as enduring and as complex as a romantic relationship, because I think we're often told that that's not the case because we don't have social markers and milestones like engagement and marriage for friendship. And I think we should, or maybe not have it. But it just felt like there was an imbalance in the way that those relationships, that friendships were valued by society. And so that was what Animals was about. It was drawing on that marriage trope and exploring it in a friendship context. And I think with adults, it took me a while to realise that actually the central arc of that is the friendship with Jenny, the main character, and her friend of 10 years, Kelly. That arc is the true arc. That's the story. That's the relationship, really. Even though you've got her ex, you've got her mum, you've got her relationship with her phone and her job, it's actually that friendship that has broken because of where her head's at. That's repairing. That is kind of the central story arc, I think. And that's something that only came apparent in the writing. And I think I probably wanted to explore getting back together with a friend, the breakup and then the getting back together and how that works. That was something that I think I really wanted to get stuck into, get my teeth into. And how do you repair a friendship? Because we see a lot of repairing love and romantic relationships. I think friendship is love, but how do we repair a friendship, and is that different, and how is it comparable? So I wanted to look at that in adults, definitely.
Yeah, I think and I'm really glad you said that. That the main sort of like arc of the story is this friendship, because it's like, I hope it is. I wasn't going to be asking about it, and if I was in a book club, that's exactly what I was saying. That's exactly what it says. It just, the heart of that book is that friendship, and I know that you write about friendship for Grazia now. I mean, you are, increasingly the go-to.
It's my bag. I just love it, and I feel like I'll never run out of material ever, because I'm lucky to have a lot of good friends, but everyone, you know, every friendship is so different. And as you know, like, I think all friendships go through phases, and as life goes on, you know, your needs change from month to month and year to year, and you have to really grow and move and adjust within your friendships. And I think there's so much to write about there, and there's so much kind of interesting, dangerous stuff as well. So, for example, the one person who I'm scared to ever meet in a room is an ex-friend. It's not an ex-lover, it's an ex-friend who actually, I think if I ever saw her in a room, my stomach would go and I wouldn't know whether to run or stay and try and be grown up. But that's just, I'm like, why do I feel that way? That, you know, I should be past that, but I'm not. And it's so interesting to me, you know, as a writer. It's, yeah, I just want to crack.
Yeah, and there are so few stories and so few novels about that breaking up with a friend, you know, and I think it's something that we all experience. It can be often, you know, as intense or much more intense than breaking up with, you know, a romantic relationship, and yet there's really nothing written about. And it just, you know, it was just so heartwarming to read something that, and actually in the whole story of it, it is the story of, you really do put out there the difficulties of friendships that span decades.
Totally, because I think it's important to, if we're going to say these relationships are as important and complex and durable as romantic relationships, then they can't be can't be perfect. They have to be far from perfect. They have to be real, and they have to be scary and heartbreaking and terrifying potentially, and they have to be all of those things that generally we've held up romantic and sexual love to be. They have to have the capacity to do those things to you as a person as well, and have that effect and break your heart.
You really can. I think, you know, one of the things that you write about, without any spoilers, but, you know, one of the things you write about, you know, one of the complexities of friendship, you know, in your 30s, when you were sort of like 20s and 30s, and even, you know, 40s, is the great divide between women who have children and women who don't. And you know, and was that something that you wanted to explore in this book in a way that you didn't really in Animals?
Yeah, definitely. I think that the character Jenny, the main character in Adults, is 35, and that's, you know, not an insignificant age, I think, for a lot of women biologically. And for me, it wasn't just biology at that point. It was, I found the mid-30s just, there was a time of great panic for various reasons, and one of those panics was, you know, whether I was going to have children or not, and who I was going to do that with, and what my options were. So yeah, that was definitely something I wanted to explore in Adults. Also, I do think that binary exists, and it's something I really hate. That binary, that dichotomy of mothers and non-mothers, and the way that women in those groups can't relate to each other. I think it's nonsense, and I think that it's something that the patriarchy wants to reinforce constantly, because it's got a divide and conquer mentality. But I actually think that in the writing of Adults, even though there's you know, women who are mothers in different ways, writing that book, I felt as though that I was learning myself about the different ways to be a mother, especially the older that you get. And it's not just all, it's far from being all just about biological procreation. It's about how, you know, you are with yourself. You can mother yourself, you can mother your own parents, you can mother your friends, you know, mother your partner, and if that's the word we want to use. But I think that we're encouraged to think that that's not the case. We're encouraged to think that once women become mothers, they join this cult and they kind of go over there, and we, you know, we can't talk and relate anymore. And actually, there's nothing mystical, mystifying about it. I think that I'm not a good mother because I've had a biological child. I think I've always had these things in me that make me the way that I treat my son well as a human, I'd hope. And I think the things that aren't, and that I'm learning about in all my relationships across the board at the same time. And I think we need to demystify it and demagic it, motherhood, because it's not a magical, golden, wonderful place. It's quite often the opposite of that in my experience. But it's just a thing that some women do and some women don't. And I think we really need to think of it as a state rather than an indication of moral fibre or of value in society. We've got to get away from that.
Because, you know, it really can be lonely for both sides. And, you know, I think it can be, you know, a really testing time, for friendship. And I think a lot of difficulties in friendships, you know, can be around this area, but it's very unspoken. You know, I think this is like one of the first books I've ever seen written on this subject.
Oh, thanks. Well, it's something that I felt personally, a lot of my friends had kids in their late 20s, and now I do feel terrible for just thinking, because I felt as though things had changed so drastically between us. It was actually, they were the same people inside, and they needed me, and I didn't know it. And I feel like I should have reached out to them more, and I should have, I shouldn't have been scared of, what it was like to be around my friends when they'd become mothers and around their kids. And I was, maybe that was an immaturity on my part, but I think that now, I've done it myself. I know that there's not that magic, there's not that mystery, and there's not that change. I'm still very much the same person. I still need the people I was friends with 10, 15, 20 years ago for the same reasons. There's not that divide.
And you spoke about, you had a baby in the time between publishing animals and
That's
publishing
right.
adults. What effect did that have on your creative process, or on the writing of the themes that were important to you around
It massacred it.
It what?
It razed it to the ground.
It massacred it.
Creative process was non-existent after having a child. I love him very much, and I'm very happy being a mum now most of the time. But at that point in time, I felt as though I was ill prepared for motherhood, as I suspect many women are, because I felt as though I'd been led to believe it would be easy, not just at the physical side, but the mental side, because I was a modern feminist and I could have it all, right? We can have it all. That's what we're told. But alas, we're not supported for that to be true. But physically, the birth was horrendous. And then mentally, I got very bad postnatal depression afterwards, which went undiagnosed for a long time because I just did not know what was up with me. I was just very angry all the time and very, very sad, and just felt very, very lonely. And so it was, obviously it was impossible to create during that time. It was barely possible to be at that time, never mind do anything productive. But I couldn't find anything written about it, so I felt like there was something really wrong with me, really weird. I was kind of, because I think so few women talk about it, because we're so ashamed, and because we have a sense of failure, where being anything other than the perfect mother, which should be easy to be, if we're not that, then we failed in some way. And I'm very proud as well, and so I thought that I was doing something terribly wrong, and so I was just lost for a long time, for the best part of the year. And then one friend actually said to me that she started just talking. I don't know whether she knew on some level, but we were going for a walk through a bluebell wood, actually, so it's surrounded by blue, and I was very depressed. And she told me about postnatal depression. I think she was just, maybe it was the age that my son was at the time, and I was just like, oh, maybe I have that. And she recommended a therapist who was nearby in Brighton. And I started going. I was reluctant to. I'd never had therapy before. Very late to the therapy party. There's just a few streamers dangling by the time I got there. All the drinks had gone. But I found it wonderful. This was a great recommendation, this therapist, and she was great. And she said something to me that turned my head around. In the first session, during which I mostly wept, she said, in her opinion, she said, in my opinion, what we call postnatal depression is an umbrella term for a very reasonable response to the pressures of motherhood in the Western world, particularly. And I was just like, wow, everything I've been feeling, all this rage, all this madness, was reasonable, because it was too hard, what I was trying to do. It was too hard, trying to raise a child on my own whilst recovering from this big physical trauma, and trying to get my work head on because I was self-employed, and just trying to do all that. It was too much. Anyone's going to crack. And so it just made me feel sane, and it made me feel understood and seen, and that was the beginning of my recovery. Just that one line that she said was the beginning of my recovery, I think. And then I took antidepressants as well for a long time, which also helped. So the combination of the two just got me, and just incrementally a bit more sleep, because sleep deprivation was a huge part of I think the postnatal depression, and just that rotten thing for a lot of people, whether however you suffer it. That really broke my brain. But yeah, so it was a long crawl out the hole, but I made it, and I was thankful to have made it, and now I look back and I feel like I barely know that woman who I was, that woman back then. I walked down streets that I walked down with my son in the buggy when I was taking him to whatever weird class, and I just think it's like watching a film with someone else in, just that memory. It's like not me. It's so strange. But I'm writing a memoir about it all now.
That's right. Your memoir about that's coming out next May, isn't it? After the Storm. Yeah. And it's really interesting. I think, I think you're saying you don't remember that person, but I think I'm really grateful for you for explaining that to us, because, I think there's a real sense of that in Jenny. When I kind of like was reading her, just got this real sense of, that expression role strain. Have you seen it around, role strain?
Oh, what's that? I like it.
Yeah. Well, it's this idea that, you can never be kind of the perfect friend and the perfect daughter and the perfect mother and the perfect colleague and the perfect work person, because to do all those jobs well as best you could, you'd have to concentrate on just one of them. Mm-hmm. And being human is trying to get your limited resources in between all of those roles all at the same time. So, yeah. And I'm seeing this more and more. And I wondered if Jenny's sort of Jenny's generation was really having to figure out this idea of role strain. Of like feeling so many pressures of you said, like having to have it all in a way that's just not possible for one human.
Just being spread too thin. Yeah, I mean, there's another phrase I really like, which is burnout, which I think is what it is as well. That's the result, isn't it, of the role strain. You just get burnt out because you're just trying to spin too many plates. You're just trying to do too much. And yeah, I'm sure that a huge part of that illness that I had went into Jenny. And even though her anxiety, it comes from a different trauma that she suffers, definitely. This is a woman who is traumatized and who is on the edge. And even though it's a comedy, I hope, and she is very clearly not well, and she needs to recover. So I'm sure a lot of that went into there.
Yeah, I mean, it's an extraordinary. I mean, Jenny as a character is incredible. One of the first things we hear from her is, I'm creating a social media post about a croissant that I'm pretty sure will define me as a human. We've talked about that, the main relationship actually in the book is about friendship, and this book is, a huge reflection on friendship. But actually, during the book, the main relationship Jenny has, despite, working at an online magazine, the Foof, despite being in a relationship with a famous photographer, despite having flatmates and lots of friends and a mother coming to stay with her, but the main relationship she has is with social media.
It is that's really true. And I think that sentence, even though I feel like I can do a bit of a wise shake of the head to it, I've been there, and I think I've been there, and I have. It's felt so important when I've been composing a particular post. And so I wanted to look at, to write about that, because it scared me. It felt like it was bordering on, well, it was triggering some of my addictive tendencies. I want to be very careful about how I use the word addiction, but in this instance, I think that, her use of social media and my use of social media when I've been, in that fragile, vulnerable place, has definitely bordered on what I would call addictive in some way. And so yeah, and just because social media is it just feels so strange and so huge and so new, and I think we're only just beginning to analyze it, and I feel like we're quite unprotected from it, even though it's wonderful in so many ways and it's so positive most of the time. It's interesting, actually. I keep seeing people saying things like, I'm having a break from social media. I'm having a break. I'm taking a break. And I think, how often do you hear that about any other area of life? Do people say, like, I'm having a break from answering the phone? I'm having a break from seeing people out on the street. We don't say that about other things. So it's like, why do we say that about social media? And I think it's because it just feels so all-encompassing, and it feels so overwhelming sometimes. It's just very, very powerful. And it's something that we quite often do alone, which I think makes it quite unique and strange as well. Even though it's social, it's quite often something where you are physically alone, and for me that makes a difference.
I think you're absolutely right. One of the things I really loved about it was your use of time. You know, and there are the many moments in the book when the main character will just disappear into social media and come out and say, oh, and it's dark, where did that go? It's like, oh, I was supposed to, you know, text my mum 3 hours ago and I haven't done it, or you know, then the night was gone. And I know you love time, because your first book's got physics and time in it a bit. It's beautiful, but you know, that really did, you know, and I think Jenny herself says that she's, you know, she is living life at terminal velocity for herself. You know, that's just that sense of time, and is so well done. I think you really make that a gorgeous point through the book, that, you know, we are losing so much time that's not beneficial to our core relationships. It feels like it is, and you're getting a massive dopamine hit, you know, in your brain. It feels so nice every time someone likes your picture of a croissant, but actually it's not the real sustaining relationships that perhaps need your time and attention.
I think that's true, and I think Jenny, she's been on cruise in a way. She's been cruising, even though she's had these bumps, and she gets these bumps of dopamine, you know, those exciting feelings where it feels like drama and it feels like progress and it feels like something. Actually, it's a flat line. You know, she's just been cruising, and I guess one of the main turning points of the book is when she wakes up to that and she's like, oh, I've lost one of my best friends, and I'm just being completely, you know, introverted and just, you know, not aware of other people in the world, and you know, way too selfish and self-obsessed, and focusing my energy in all the wrong places that are not doing me good.
But I felt, you know, so sorry for her. I mean, do you think, you know, the book is called Adults. It's about becoming an adult. You know, it's about finding, you know, yourself, really. But, you know, do you think there's just so much more complexity in becoming an adult in this time of where we haven't really figured out how much social media is good for us? We haven't really kind of written the book on what is sensible usage, you know, and if you know, do you think she's really, you know, right out there finding out to her own cost of what is good use of social media?
I think that she's got it wrong in a lot of ways as to what being a grown-up means and what being an adult means, because I think we're told we have to have all these things by a certain age, aren't we? We're told we have to have a job, the house, the marriage, the kids, and if we don't have those things, then, you know, we start to feel like our life is somehow lacking and we've not achieved enough. And so I think that social media puts that through a prism, a really powerful prism that we're forced to look at quite often. And I think for her, she's comparing herself constantly to other people online, especially other women, especially one other woman who she thinks has some of the things that she's not quite got yet. So even though I think ultimately it's about things to do with the human condition that are just eternal, like worrying about being liked and worrying about whether we're being our true selves and whether we're being, you know, authentic, and worrying about how we're presenting to people. That's all stuff that's been around forever, but I think social media is a powerful prism to put that through, and I'd argue especially for women. I think, you know, particularly it's quite often hard, especially to be a woman on there, because of some of the abuse that you get, because of some of the negativity that you get, and because of, I've read a few really interesting reports that are to do with the amygdala and about the way that women's brains respond to negative stimuli. And obviously it's wrong to generalize, and I'd always want to be careful about talking about differences between men and women in the way their brains work. But for me, it does ring a bit true that women tend to get more upset by the same negative stimuli rather than, you know, repeated negative stimuli. I think can be very, very damaging, and we keep going back to it. It's almost like a self-torture thing that a lot of women who, you know, use social media, and if they're going to a toxic place, if they're fragile or vulnerable when they're using it, I think it can be really, really negative.
You can see why it's such an incredible novel. You can see why it's such an incredible novel at the moment. It's just really beginning to look at all of our various roles in modern life through this prism of social media for the first time. I love the way that Jenny's column is called Intense Modern Women. That's really relatable. Jenny, we're going to go... Emma, we're going to go for a 10-minute break now. Do please text in any questions you'd like me to put to Emma. Do refresh your crisp bowl. Get yourself a nice drink for the second half of book club. And I think at the end of the next session, we're going to have Emma, who's going to read a little bit from Adults. Is that right?
Yes,
Right,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So we're going to be finishing off the second half with Emma reading from her book Adults. So we will see you in 10 minutes. Thank you. And we're going to start. And we're going to start Book Club Live by hearing from Emma reading from her book Adults.
Hello, welcome back. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. I'm going to read from about a third of the way through the book. And I think all I need to explain, because you've already talked about Kelly being Jenny's best friend, Art is the name of her ex. Art said, "Are you crying?" I was openly weeping in front of the TV. "What is it?" he said, his face open, his hand on my hand as he dropped to his knees. "What?" "This," I said, weakly gesturing to the screen. A manatee was swimming in a school. A smaller manatee was swimming behind it. "Oh, babes, you know I shouldn't watch nature documentaries." "No, it's fine. I'm not sad. It makes me want to have a baby." Art's face changed. He stood up. "What?" he said, laughing. "It makes me want to have a baby," I bellowed. "What, a great ugly sea cow?" "I don't know why. Order amongst the chaos? Blame Darwin, David Attenborough. I don't know." I wept more. He looked around my feet. "Have you had wine?" "No," I said. I noticed him notice the empty glass. "Well, not to a traumatic degree." He put his arm around me. "Why don't you put some comedy on? Leave these delightful creatures to it." He turned over. It was Frasier, Daphne supposedly from Manchester, abusing Niall, and he was affecting not to love it. "What do you think?" I said, "about babies?" I hate to be prosaic, but I am approaching my mid-30s, and once you hit 35, you're technically a geriatric mother. They actually call you that. "Yeah, maybe. I mean, yeah." I haven't given it loads of thought. "So what should we do?" I was thinking we could order a takeaway and demolish a box set. He got up. Canned laughter erupted from the TV. I said, "You like hanging out with Kelly and Sonny, don't you?" Sonny's Kelly's son. "You enjoy that dynamic, that role." "Yeah, Kelly's a tough cookie sometimes, but I don't mind seeing them the odd weekend. Let's just relax and try and be creative right now. That's the life we said we wanted, isn't it? I don't want us to lose the mystical parts of ourselves." He said, "I'm really hungry. Are you not hungry?" He'd been eating a banana in the bedroom that morning, standing there by the window, his back hairs striking out a coarse aura. I'd felt a stronger sexual attraction than I'd ever felt, before or since, to any human, any ape. Was this raging estrogen? It was a valid question. My desire for a child, where had it sprung from? Was it a desire for a lifestyle upgrade? Or the wish to do what my mother couldn't? It was an autumn feeling. That's the best way I can describe it. That joy, that terror, that rush, the silence, the peace, the fear, everything in a puddle and a pile of leaves, everything dying and coming up gold. You know, when you see a beautiful view and you sort of surrender to it, you feel yourself slacken and weaken, and you slouch a bit like you're broken down, reduced, mortalized. And it's awful, but it's also a fucking relief, you know? Later, we lay in bed, our faces inches apart, breathing each other's breath. I suppose I would like to create something I didn't have for myself, for someone else, and myself by proxy, he said. But I'm scared I don't have the skills. I said, "Me too." "What else do you want?" he said. And this is in italics, this is her thoughts. "Sometimes I think I want to walk down a school corridor in autumn time and see sugar paper drawings tacked to walls and recognise them. Sometimes I want that more than anything. Other times I just want to be alone with my imagination. Mostly though, I just want to not care what every single person thinks of me all the time. And I want to not have so many people's opinions whirring around my brain. And I want to share my life with someone and not get bored. And I'm so scared that isn't possible because that's a lot of boxes to empty and sort. And sometimes I just want to have a shower and put on a clean pair of jeans and eat a sandwich in a cafe and feel like a normal fucking person." I can't even remember what I answered in real life. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, we've had lots of questions come in, and on lots of the things that we've been talking about. Thank you so much for sending them in. I wanted to start with Jude's. Hello, Jude's. How are you? And this is a question. Oh, hello, Jude. How are you? And this is a question about digital addiction. So she wants to talk about your life lash idea. in the book.
Oh, yeah.
And she said, Jenny's digital addiction is already reflecting behaviour today, saying we all have dear friends who think it's perfectly okay to flip up their screen and tap out a comment mid-conversation, a meal, hopefully not sex. Although I looked up the evidence for people checking their phones during sex, and it was a report done at the University of Virginia in 2016. 1 in 10.
You're kidding. Oh my God, at what point and kind of for how long? Did it give any details?
Do you know, I've got I've got the name of the report.
I mean, I'm appalled, but I'm also kind of in awe of anyone with the goal to do that, you know. Might start a conversation about something else, like what you're going to have to eat, you know, or something, but actually interfacing with another person. Wow.
I think it's something to do with notifications. I think it's not actually kind of like, you know, doing a bit of work. I think it's the actual name of the report was interactions, sort of notifications, interaction with human behaviour. And so I think it was just like checking for the odd notification when perhaps you think the sex is finished, but, you know, perhaps everyone else doesn't.
Maybe it's finished for you. Oh wow, that's so rude. I mean, but it's also really instinctive, isn't it? You hear the noise, and something like overrides the human, the polite person in you, and just the kind of the phone attached idiot just goes to it and just and it's mindless. I think it is mindless. Sometimes I've thought it's mindless when I've just been going through the same apps or the same things. You know, I check that one, all checked. I check that one, all checked. I check that one. The social media, but then also you know, and you go through the motions. And it's like a loop. It's like you're stuck on a loop, and it's so mindless, and that's scary, isn't it? And that's such a big loss of time.
Yeah, and I think, you know, one of the second questions from Jude's is now that we are kind of in this time of being, you know, to some extent isolated, and we humans are not supposed to be isolated. You know, are we going to be driven more towards technology for connection, and are we all destined to become Jennies?
And I hope we're not all destined to become Jennies. I think that Jenny's her mindset isn't just the result of social media and her attachment to it. It's because of the life trauma that she's been through as well. And I think it's very specific to who she is as well, and who she is because of her upbringing and her relationship with her mother, and what she's carrying because of that. And then social media is the stage that her drama, her little mini tragedy plays out on at that point. But in terms of whether, we're all using it a lot more now, but I almost feel like because of that, I'm getting a bit better at it, and I'm getting better at compartmentalizing it. It's almost like it's forcing me to have a crash course in what it means to my life right now to be on social media, and what I can take and where my boundaries are. And so maybe it's not all bad.
Yeah,
let's try and be a bit optimistic about it. It might be like it's a bit of a baptism of fire right now, because we're all forced to use it to such an extent that we've really got to question it and try and make it healthy. I think there's a lot of chat around mental health. I've really noticed that, and I'm really happy about that. And magazines, you know, like Bratsy, are doing a great job in keeping that at the forefront of conversation, because I think it's a huge thing with people being isolated, and it's something that I feel we're talking about a lot, and that's great, and maybe that's helpful in terms of people analysing their social media use too.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think, you know, we work a lot with big ideas at Salon London, and we're always, you know, really trying to get these big ideas from academia out to people so they can take them into their own lives to make their lives happier. And one of the things I've really noticed is technology has been telling us how to live, and technology has been telling us the pace at which it wants us to live. And actually this time is a little bit of a time that we can say, but it's up to us at the pace we want to live our lives, and we can tell technology when it comes in and in which way we want to use it. But we have to be mindful that every time we get a notification, it's like, you know, having a glass of wine, or, you know, doing something you really love. There's a hit of chemical dopamine into your head that makes you feel good, and that's it's really hard to put down, hence checking it during sex. Not me. 1 in 10 people.
It doesn't say much for the sex, does it? Or maybe it says a lot for the messages. Maybe the sex is great, but the messages are really golden, you know?
Right, Emma, I'm moving on. So, okay, I've got a question from Tamsin. Hello, Tamsin. And she said she found your presentation of female friendship visceral and refreshingly honest. Oh, yes.
Thank you. That's so nice. Thank you.
She said, are these relationships drawn from an exasperation of how female connections are presented in media, or from your personal experience, or both?
Both, definitely both. I think that, that quite often friendship, I mean, I think there's a lot more culturally now about friendship, and that's great. There are a lot more books about it, a lot more films about it, a lot more TV shows about it, and that's fantastic. But I think a few years ago when I was writing adults, and certainly when I was writing animals, it was either kind of women just being awful to each other, or it was frothy kind of like, oh, it's all lovely and perfect all the time, and it rarely went deep beneath the surface. And so I think that's sort of what I just wanted to do, and just found myself doing, because that's just what I was interested in. And yes, and then as to whether it's my own friendships and relationships, yes, lots and lots. I hope never to the point that any of my friends would feel exposed or sort of stolen from in the work. But I think by the time, even if you draw from the seeds of real life, by the time you've made it work as fiction, it's always grown away from the truth in some way anyway, because you've had to push it through all these devices towards the reader, and also just to make it work over, however many thousand words your book is, you have to take it away from the truth, because the truth will never work like that. So hopefully just drawn on, I guess, for emotional truth, if that doesn't sound too wanky, and just for like the heart and the core of it, and the central dilemma. The central dilemma of my characters in my novels are always mine. At the point where I start writing the book, the central dilemma is always mine, and then it kind of life moves on from that, and a clear distance on it, and I add all these bells and whistles and things that just make it work as a novel. And so it doesn't feel like me at the end, it feels far from me at the end, and maybe that's partly why I do it. But I think, initially there is definitely that core of usually worry or fear or panic, or heartbreak that spurs the whole thing into motion for me.
Oh, thank you. And we've got a similar question about mothers, from Molly. And I remember you saying when we met briefly, I think when you were writing adults, and saying that I want to write something that examines our relationships with our mothers again, kind of like something that doesn't get a huge amount of consideration in modern novels. So it's the same question, that is, were you drawing on your own experience, or is it something that you wanted to write in a different way to what you were reading?
I think both, again. Both things are true. I think that the mother, Carmen, Jenny's mum in adults, is probably my favorite character in the whole book. I mean, she's such a laugh. She's for anyone who's not read it, she's a gin-swigging psychic medium. I mean, what's not to love? And she's great. I mean, you'd want to go out for a drink with her. You wouldn't want to go out for a drink with Jenny, who's just like this neurotic little creature. You'll be checking her phone all the time you were talking and really doing your head in. But yeah, her mum, Carmen, is great, and she's so witty, and I mean, she's flawed, as all humans are, and she hasn't always been the best mother, or maybe even a good enough one, or whatever. But I think that she's massively likable, she's massively witty, and that is my mum, even though, and she's a single mum, Carmen, as well, which has affected her challenge, many of the challenges that she had when Jenny was small, and so my mum, isn't a single mum and isn't a psychic medium, and so there's not a lot of the details are not drawn from life, and nor would I want them to be. But I think there are aspects of Carmen that for sure come, straight down the line from my mum, which are her wit, which are her, she's an entertainer. My mum is an entertainer, and she's a party girl as well. She's a real party girl, and those things, there's a flamboyance to her, which I've loved and hated, and throughout my life at different points and different twists and turns. As to the relationship with Jenny at the point we meet her in the book, I think that that had to be entirely constructed in order for it to work. So I think, yeah, there's an essence that Carmen's character that I drew on from life, but in terms of, yeah, them living together and what, yeah, where it goes from there, that's all constructed, and probably a lot better. I mean, my mum's read it. I was nervous about my mum reading it, because I'm always nervous about people I know really well reading it, but you have to not be censored by your family. That's what they say, right? Don't let your family censor you. And I was scared about my mum reading it, because I was thinking, is she gonna, think this is in some way about her? But she's so wonderful and so supportive and so generous about it, and kind of even, even when I actually do directly write about it. So, like, for instance, in the nonfiction and in my Grazia columns, sometimes I do have to actually quote real people and write about real things, and write about my real mum and things like that. But I always show them first. Sometimes I'll change names as well if that's what people are more comfortable with. But I'll always show people before it sort of goes anywhere, because I think that's just the right way to do it. But my mum has never even told me to tweak anything ever. Not that she would, not that I've ever kind of torn her to shreds, but she always just says, write what you want, do it, whatever, just go for it, which is just lovely and very liberating. Aww. And generous.
I remember reading about when your mum and I think your dad Frank, sorry, we're reading Animals, and you were like saying, look, the sex is nothing, that's not, almost like telling them that that's not sex, that's not, it's a story. It's just
the way they have sex, it's not like the way I have sex necessarily. Don't make that leap, Dad, whatever you do. But the story when my mum read it as a proof, Animals. And then my dad was like, walked past it. I think it was, he walked past my desk and it was sitting there, when it come through as an actual proper book proof rather than a galley proof like my mum read. And he was like, oh yeah, I think I should read that. And my mum just walked past after not having said anything about Animals to me after she'd read the galley proof. She just said, you don't want to read that, Frank. Just like that. That was my mum's damning review of Animals. You don't want to read that, Frank.
I
think he had things, but we've just had to have some very frank, pun intended, conversations about drugs and sex. And it's like, they're always more clued up than you think, your parents. We do them a great disservice, I think, a lot of the time, our parents. And I hope I've outgrown that now. I'm certainly old enough to. I should certainly have outgrown that, where I'm worried about my mum and dad might think, I don't know what I'm doing. Or will they always worry? I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. It's your book's dedicated to your mum, I think, and I think another amazing theme in the book is this idea of having an adult relationship with your parent, with them as a person, as opposed to your mother.
Yes. And that is what I really think being a grown-up might mean for Jenny. It might mean just kind of accepting, just forgiving her mum and forgiving herself for the past, and just accepting that they are both just two people and they have a friendship in a space that is not, where they're not defined by their roles, and that, just accepting some kind of progress and just I think I put the line in the book, but I suppose I think that if you feel as though you're a better mother to yourself than your mother was to herself, or there's some kind of progress, if you mother yourself the best that you possibly can imagine, then there's evolution, there's progress, there's that everything's going in the right direction. And that's honestly that's the only thing that makes me feel like a grown up, looking after myself and kind of, and just respecting myself and just, it's not always possible, and it's not as hard, it's not always easy, and it certainly relies on lots of other relationships and factors as well. But I think, the mothering of oneself is really key to being wiser and older.
Oh, yeah, and I think, we did a session together with Scylla Elworthy. I don't know if you remember, a couple of years ago, and I remember her saying, what you have to understand is that, the post-menopausal woman is going to take over the world, because at that time, you've kind of got everything out of the way. you need to do biology, and you're absolutely free. And I just got that real sense with Carmen, the mother. It's just like, this is my time, and I'm going to do what I want. And again, it's just not a character trope that you see very often.
Yeah, and she's never found her people as well. She's never found her group. She's always been a bit of a loner, Carmen, and often happily so. But her journey in the book is about finding her friends and her people and who she wants to hang out with and who's going to make her feel good for this, this period of freedom now.
Okay. We've got a question from Kitty, and she says, I'm curious about your choice of the characters' careers. Carmen is a slightly bonkers medium and ex-actor, Art is a photographer, and Kelly is a receptionist. And also curious that part of Jenny's redemption, I can't really say that, but let's just say, spoilers, but let's say Jenny's working at an online magazine called The Foof. So, yeah, I wondered if you could, talk about your choice of characters' careers.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, for Jenny, it's because I just write writers as the main character. I mean, that's possibly really annoying for everyone, isn't it? Sorry, but I just do because that's something I can write about, and because that just felt right for her to do that job as well in sort of London media wanky world. It felt like that was right. That was where she'd be sort of spinning out, and so I wanted to very much to capture that, that atmosphere within, a magazine that actually was calling itself a feminist magazine, but actually it's questionable as to how feminist the magazine is too, because I wanted to try and crack open what I've seen as the kind of furious commodification of feminism and the furious branding and hashtagging of feminism and the marketing of feminism, which to me just seems at odds with the movement and odds with progress. And so I just wanted to poke a load of fun at that as well, and hopefully not in a way that stops progress, but just in a way that just says, hey, I think it's just important to interrogate any of this stuff we're being sold, because we are being sold it. So that was Jenny's world and Jenny's job, and also just because I thought it'd be really funny if I could put some of her columns and some of the things she was writing about column-wise, like the column's called Intense Modern Woman, and it's just kind of slightly tragic, because she's not any of those things. Well, she's intense, but not in a good way. And then as to her mum, well, I wanted Carmen to be a psychic because I've always been a bit obsessed with psychics, firstly, and I've always been a bit obsessed with tarot. I used to get my tarot read every week when I was like in my mid-teens in a place called what was it called? It was the Corn Exchange in Manchester. If anyone's from Manchester and remembers the Corn Exchange, I used to go and see Avril there every weekend, and I used to love it. And I think there's been a great resurgence in tarot now, and in a lot of new age stuff. And I wonder if it's because, a bit like therapy, it's a way of storifying our experiences and a way of, whatever you think of it, whatever you think of what's behind it, I think it can be really useful and really interesting and really fun. So I wanted to write about those things and do some research into them, and it seemed like Carmen would be a good fit for that because she used to be an actress and she's a failed actress. So I thought she'd want to do something that was theatrical and where she'd have an audience and make good money, because she was a single mum. She needs to think of all these things, and so so that just felt like a natural way for her to go, as well as fulfilling my little obsession. But also I wanted to set up the idea of, because Jenny mocks her mum in a lot of ways for believing in the voices and spirit, and Carmen mocks Jenny for going on the internet so much and listening to all these voices in the ether. So I just thought there's a nice parallel there between all the voices in the spirit world that may or may not be there, and then all the voices in Jenny's internet world and online that may or may not be real or important, and blah blah. So I just thought that was a nice thing to set them at odds. It felt like a lovely little parallel.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. We've got a couple of people who are watching and just wanted to say hello. We've got Tara in Chicago. Hello, Tara. I know. Hello, America. Hope you're okay. Sending you lots of love. And Justine, who's in North London, Kentish Town. Hi, Justine.
It's Justine Solomons. Hello, Justine.
Yes. Hello. I've got a question from Linz. She says, this is wonderful. I think that's to you. She said, her question is, what would Jenny make of Bridget Jones?
Oh, wow. I think she'd love her. I think she'd really, I think that she'd probably just instantly, though, turn it into something negative by worrying that she's not as funny, not as attractive, not as cool, not as popular as Bridget Jones. She'd probably just instantly do all of that. But I think that they could probably go out for a large glass of Chardonnay and, rattle around each other for a while quite happily.
Thank you. We've got a question about the form. It's an amazing book in the way it's written. I really love the way that you put drafts of emails in that you haven't sent, that have been written in certain states of mind. And I particularly love the one that you wrote to someone who had unfollowed you on social media, asking. It was just so funny. So what you do best, Emma, is just so funny and so moving, so relatable and so understandable. We've got quite a question about form, was really asking about your the tense that you use, the present tense, and whether that form was used to really add to the thoughtlessness and the way Jenny's has this mindless obsession with social media. I wondered if you could talk about that. Thank you for your question.
I think definitely, because in the present tense, and it just had to be very frantic, very furious, very pacey. I mean, a lot of people have described the book as an exhausting read, and I think that's really true. And I think I probably found it quite all novels exhausting to write, right? But yeah, and whether that was, I think it suited the character for sure. It's kind of where Jenny's head's at. I think I wanted to show a woman's brain exploding on the page. That was something that I just wanted to show, her brain just going everywhere, and try and use the page to show how fragmented and how frantic and in a panic she is. So there are some pages where, so as well as all the bits and bobs you've got with all the social media and the messages and the emails, you've also got some pages where there's just one word on the page, and just to show, just because I just wanted to just try and show her brain disintegrating before the reader's eyes, and I just like playful books like that are self-conscious, that play with form. I really enjoy that. I enjoy reading them, and I enjoy writing them. So I think that it's definitely. I think I wrote animals in. I can't remember what I wrote animals in. Was animals in the past or in the present? I can't remember. But it feels like it was in the past. Maybe it was. Oh, anyway, this one definitely had to be in the present, because it's so immediate and it's so, just fast and furious. And I think that's maybe also because that's where my brain was at. And just, from the writer's point of view, that was completely separate to a character. I think that I knew I had to break this book up into chunks, because when I was writing it, I was still recovering from the PND a lot. And I was, still getting my brain back. And it had been a long time since Animals had come out. Animals was 2014. So it was a long time. It certainly felt like a long time. And so I think that it was, it felt like it kept my momentum up to write in that way as a writer, as well as suiting the character. I think those two things were just very symbiotic.
Yeah, thank you for your question. I've got a question about postnatal depression and the way that it is portrayed in media, and I wondered if you've been your books have really created stories in spaces that weren't being served by novels currently, or I know your postnatal depression is a memoir, but I just wondered if you could talk a bit about what is out there, if what stories are out there for that are dealing with postnatal depression.
Well, I couldn't find any, which was partly why I wanted to write a book. I couldn't find anything, but I have noticed some things since. There's a brilliant new book called Inferno that's just come out. That's by, I can't remember the author's name, but it's about postnatal rage, which is quite a specific thing. But that sounds wonderful, and I've got a copy of that, which I'm going to read very soon. And a lot of people I know who've read that have said it's fantastic. So it's called Inferno. And then also, I don't know if you saw Tully, the film Tully. That was good, with Charlize Theron, which was about exhaustion, probably. I don't know if they actually defined it as postnatal depression, but definitely postnatal exhaustion, and what that can do to, without wanting to give anything away, but what that can do to a woman's mind. And I thought that was really well done. I'd highly recommend that for a watch. And I think there are lots and lots of brilliant books about motherhood that are coming to the fore and that are being published, and more and more memoirs, especially, where women are just adding to the conversation, and it feels like we're getting much more of a spectrum of experience, rather than just this is the perfect golden thing, and it will just mean that you are elevated and have new levels of compassion and empathy and skills and all of that stuff, which is just rubbish. So I think I think there's more and more stuff appearing.
We'll really look forward to reading that next May, Emma. And I'm really relieved to hear that you're writing something. I think you just have a way of really speaking for the concerns of the time, and sharing your stories and your experiences so beautifully. I just wanted to say we've got to wrap up. You're welcome. Someone's just thanked you for answering your question about form. You're welcome. I just wanted to finish off now by saying, I know that you say that, and when we spoke today, we were talking about tonight, and you were talking about the, creative wasteland that you think that you were in when after having your baby and writing this book, and just want to say thank you so much for writing it. And I think you've written an incredible book, an amazing novel, and I just think you've created so much in that time. Since you wrote Animals, you wrote the adaptation yourself. You learned a brand new skill, and you made the adaptation. They made a feature of it, and it's now a feature film. And you've created this book, Adults. And I think I am your friend, Emma, and if I was Jenny's friend, I think what. You've done a huge amount. We're all so proud of you, and thank you.
Thank you. I had a lot of help with the screenplay, I will say that. It's very much a collaboration. I'm not just being falsely modest. I had so much help, and I needed so much help. It was a huge learning curve, but everyone was great. The producers and the director were just wonderful, and pointing me in lots of the right directions. So yeah, thank you. That's so kind.
Yeah, no, exactly. Filmmaking is collaborative, and we haven't really spoken about Susie Brambles, but watching you kind of like go through that feature film, it really felt like, oh my God, Emma is my Susie Brambles. For those who haven't read the book.
On Instagram, don't believe it. There was a lot of, around that time, there was a lot of wiping pooey bums, not just my child. No, I'm just kidding. And just, obviously that was just like a very small, slice of what was going on, but it was so nice to be involved. And also it was just so nice that they involved me so much, because now I look back and I just think, that was like, I was the writer. Like in Hollywood, in films, like no one gives a damn about the writer, and like the people making the films, that film really involved me. Like we went to Sundance together where we premiered the film, and I was in all the photo shoots. I was being interviewed. It was like, that would never normally happen. It would not, and so I feel like I was given a really lucky ride there.
Because you're gorgeous and you're lovely to be around, and everyone wants to be your friends. And Animals is a fantastic read. If you haven't read it, people who've got adults, fantastic read. And Animals is on Netflix, really good fun. So it just remains to say thank you so much, Emma, for doing our very first Book Club Live digital. Thank you.
My pleasure and honour. Thank you so much, Helen, for such wonderful questions and for having me. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining and for listening and for reading. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being part of our first Book Club Live. Thank you so much for all of your questions, and we hope we'll see you at another one. This Book Club Live is now closed.
Stay safe, everyone.